Hi Shawn, it's Jean of Mecca Normal. I'm great, how are you doing? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, you're sort of off in the distance a little bit now, but okay. Yeah, born and raised here. Always return. Yeah, he does, as do I. I'm a little farther away. You'll see me running to and from work every now and then. On the drive. Are you kidding me? No, nothing like that is happening to us. Oh, you know, it's always been a bit of this, a bit of that. During those years when we were putting out a record every year, I was also doing some freelance writing and commercial art. And Dave has been the editor and designer over at Bookworld for many years. So those have always been, you know, sort of very helpful to that side of the financial side of things. But that's never been our objective, you know, to sell records. That's kind of boring, right? That was never our reason for starting or for continuing. Well, it's really a strange time to be asking that, because just recently it feels like all of those original reasons are surfacing again, in that it was my feeling as a person in my mid-20s who was familiarizing myself with social philosophies, including feminism and anarchism, and also participating in what remained in the early 80s of the punk rock scene. Which was somewhat of a distortion from its early years, which I kind of missed. But it was, in fact, misogyny and sexism and oppression and injustice. Really was the spark for me as I was discovering in my 20s, as one does, what I thought were outrageous atrocities within our own social structures, and I wanted to address those with the idea that I could change things. No, in fact, we did change things through the exact process that we set out to do, which was to inspire young people, young women in particular, to do something that we were doing, at the very least, which was to start a band and to talk about very important things that they were going through in the culture and communities they participated in. And that became Riot Girl, which we've been widely acknowledged as an inspiration to the co-founders of. Riot Girl being a social movement, really, that started up in Olympia, Washington, where our record label was, and we spent a good deal of time and played many shows. And I spoke a lot between songs about that very thing, about women getting together, and it was at a time when women were, you know, in the audience, or that they were the girlfriend of the guys in the band, or, you know, maybe there was female representation in a band if it was a bass player or something like that, but women really weren't speaking their minds in terms of any anger or sense of injustice within the context of the band or in culture, really. So to have figured, you know, I mean, it's a real bonus to Mecca Normal, and has contributed to our longevity, really, that we were acknowledged for being an inspiration. And we've since, you know, I mean, it's not simply boasting about that part of our history, but it's a damn good example of how you really can change the world. Oh yeah, I mean, the lineage is there. Pussy Riot, the word riot is in the context of the shared context of Riot Girl and Pussy Riot, and I believe some of the members of Pussy Riot acknowledged their inspiration, you know, was taken from Riot Girl specifically. So, you know, again, that's a very powerful message to take away, that Riot Grrrl, of course, changed the world in music and socially, to the extent that you know, everybody has kind of heard about Riot Grrrl as a movement, at least within music communities, and you know, they got into mainstream media at that time. But then it went into sort of a dormant phase for about 20 years until it started, maybe even just that number, that magic number of a 20-year anniversary, and then the Pussy Riot activity started up, and now it seems that, you know, with the inclusion of social media, there's a lot of sharing of information about those days, and artifacts are being collected, and museum shows are being put together, and there's still a lot of energy, new energy from younger people who are interested in what Riot Grrrl is now. Well, I mean, there was, of course, our esteemed punk rock scene, which included legendary and important figures internationally like DOA and the Subhumans, and that was a real thing, you know. So there was attention paid. And of course, the punk movement in its larger context certainly included the voices of women, you know, maybe more so in other cities and communities than in Vancouver. But, you know, it was still a very fragmented bit of business to have a band, because we were still all reading up on, you know, what was happening in other places. You had to connect with people. And I sort of forget how we did that, whether we, you know, we read about bands, or you listened to specific shows on college radio and tried to figure out, you know, what was going on. You shared albums and made mixtapes and sent those to groups of friends elsewhere, and it was all kind of patchwork cobbled together. No, we're pretty much in this for the long haul. You know, David and I have an incredible creative collaboration that we both value greatly, and we've been writing songs in between albums, and we have been actively adapting some of our content into other areas. I took to writing novels. David creates graphic novels. And then as far as performing, we decided to create a lecture called How Art and Music Can Change the World. So we'd be out presenting that in university classrooms and art galleries, and just trying to take some of that content that used to get separated out when we would go to radio stations on tour. And instead of typically talking about our new album and all of these kinds of things, we used that airtime to talk about grassroots organizing and the actual content of the material that we were generating, which would be based on sexism and feminism and poverty and all the sort of swirl of political ideas that end up being what a Mecca Normal album is. So we took all that content and we wanted to manage it more ourselves and present it in places that were more maybe adult type venues, you know, classrooms where you're in the position of sharing information from a different vantage point than a stage at nighttime in a bar. I'd quit drinking about 15 years ago, and so I didn't really feel that urge to be out in bars as much. So we took to presenting art shows that included Mecca Normal songs, and the lecture, which also includes Mecca Normal songs either written for whatever topic we were addressing, if that was specific, or just general songs out of our repertoire. So there was never a time we ceased to exist. It's always just been on our own terms, and for whatever reason, we weren't that inspired. More to do with the climate of releasing records from the heady days of the 90s, when it was all pretty exciting. There was that that block of hitting the point where the internet kind of took over and downloading songs became the thing, and everybody's general sense of feeling like their band was a going concern. Well, not everybody's, but certainly our feeling was that there wasn't that much interest in records per se. So we found other things to do. Not really short stories. The main things have been 2 experimental novels which have been published. David actually started a press, a small press, to publish the first one, and then the other one was published by Arsenal Pulp Press, Vancouver's Arsenal Pulp Press. And then since that point, I've been awarded 2 Canada Council grants, which has been fantastic to give me time to develop the writing. And I've most recently completed 2 novels, which are out and about, seeking publication. Well, if you mean these aren't cohesive pieces that have been set into a musical context, let's put it that way. They're pieces that either were prevalent in my mind at the time that we were writing songs. I was either looking for material within the novels that I'd written, or I found them to be sort of standalone segments that could be interpreted without knowing all the surrounding story. So it's not like the album is going to present a story if you listen the whole way through. So the pieces are... It gets complicated here when you stick around as long as I have. Had 30 years writing lyrics, which originally were very direct and a sort of anger and dissatisfaction with the way the world was, to now still deliberating on the male-female dynamic and taking it into expressions that are much longer, the full-length novel. So to boil down the two novels at hand, one is called Obliterating History, a guitar-making mystery, domination and submission in a small-town garage. And within this novel, a woman who's a Wall Street stockbroker partners up with a man in a situation, a relationship that's based on domination and submission, through which she is addressing her own inability to trust. So in fact, the issue of consent and being respected and that consent is adhered to is very much part of what her exploration is all about. And in the other novel, called The Black Dot Museum of Political Art, there's a narcissist who is out basically hurting people, as narcissists tend to do, because they lack empathy, primarily. And there's a woman who has an uncanny ability to sort of read a subtext within that narcissist's realm of activity. And she ends up curing narcissism using abstract expressionist paintings. So I gave this woman, she's a museum curator, I gave her this task of curing narcissism because I frequently had heard that women readers want their female protagonists to do something important rather than, the things that women tend to get up to in popular fiction. So I thought I would just have this protagonist go ahead and cure narcissism, which is in fact an incurable personality disorder. I have studied informally researching narcissism because it's once you become aware of its nature and how pervasive it is, and what sort of damage it can do, it's quite a fascinating realm that I don't think people in general maybe grasp. And it doesn't help that there's sort of two meanings. There's the sort of popular way we use narcissism as a person is just vain or self-centered, but there is this other personality disorder that really these individuals, for one reason or another, usually some form of trauma in childhood, they did not develop an ability to empathize with other people. So they really cannot. Their brain is really broken in that way, that you know, people who don't have this personality disorder take empathy really for granted. It's what we all do. It's how we mitigate our interactions. We put ourselves in other people's shoes. You wouldn't like that if that happened to you, that sort of thing. It's extremely common. But if you physically can't do that, then you're operating in a whole different way, and it behooves people to understand some of the symptoms and indicators of what that particular psychological predisposition manifests as. The title of the album is Empathy for the Evil, and in the way that you know, to empathize with people who, well, to empathize in general is never a bad thing, but when we want to categorize things as being evil or monstrous, it's perhaps better to dig a little deeper and to consider to empathize with why and what is going on there, and especially to understand more about how people function who are not functioning well.